with our panelists here. Of course, also top on the agenda is the recalling of South Africa President Jacob Zuma. And we know that, yes, his leadership has been checkered with so many challenges when it comes to good governance and ethical leadership as well. So we shall be looking at that and a raft of other issues as well. Also, we have the Ethiopian opposition leader who has just been released by the Ethiopian government. We'll look at that as well much later in the course of the program. But for now, let's drill deeper and see what we have in our dailies this morning. We begin with the Daily Nation, and this is your splash today. Let me just go over there and make sure that you can see it clearly. This is New Circle, it says, of power, and you can see them surrounding the president there. All the president's men are finally moving closer to action. What's the big deal? That's the probing question. We have the story on page 4 of the Daily Nation today. Githu Muigai, a Kibaki appointee, finally paves the way for Uhuru Lolist, and they're actually all spread here on the front page of the Daily Nation. We have Justice Paul Kihara, Kariuki, Court of Appeal President poised to replace out of favor Githu Muigai as government chief legal advisor. Also, we do have Nje Muturi, Kenya's long-time buddy. The former Solicitor General finally moves from Sharia House to the inner circles of State Houses, as he has been with President Uhuru for a long time. Also was a personal assistant to Uhuru when he was in the Ministry of Finance. Also, we do have here Kinuthia Mbugua, former Nakuru governor and administration police chief, brings his trademark nonsense style of leadership inside the gates of State House. And Dr. Fred Matiang'i, his success in reforming the education sector has endeared him to the president. And those are the faces circling the president today. You have the full story continuing on page 2 of the Daily Nation today. Make sure you grab that so that you can see those stories. Also, we do have the Star for you. Is Uhuru going for Supreme Court? That is a probing question. Also on the front page of the day of the Star, it says Attorney General Githu Muigai out as President picks Appeal Court Judge Kihara Mwangi names new nominees to Judicial Service Commission. This story tucked away on page 4 and 5 of the Star this morning. You have their faces as well spread on the front page of the Star. Jubilee MPs ignore State House PG. Uhuru vows action. Less than 50 out of 117 MPs attended the meeting in which they accused Jubilee leaders of lecturing. Right? You can follow that. Kalonzo now declines NASA proposed date of February 28th for swearing in. Remember, that was a splash on the front page of the Star yesterday. And of course, he's stoutly denied that as well. We'll give you all the gritty details much later in the course of the program. Allow me to show you what we have on the front page of the Business Daily. Beg your pardon. There you go. 43 billion shillings bid for U.S. fighter jets hang in the balance. U.S. government says Kenya has missed 2 critical deadlines set for the deal, it says. And Kenya's plan to acquire a fleet of military aircraft worth 43 billion shillings from the United States has been left hanging in the balance after the government failed to enter a binding transaction agreement with the vendors within the set deadline. The U.S. Congress investigative arm, the Government Accountability Office, says Kenya failed to commit to the deal for the purchase of 12 militarized air tractors alongside rocket launchers, machine guns and guided bombs, whose order was first made in December 2015. Of course, you can remember also this was embroiled in some controversy, but still also there are some kinks to be ironed out, as we can see according to the Business Daily today. Let's see what we have also across the border. We have a Citizen for you. What next? After Zuma refuses to resign, right? That's a probing question on the front page of a Citizen in Tanzania. South Africa's ruling party decides to recall the country's president after he reportedly refused to step down. That story, you can follow it on page 2 of the Citizen in Tanzania. UDSM staff query Area's pay list is also a question that you want to follow on a story on page 2 of the Citizen in Tanzania. Still in Tanzania, we have also the Mwananchi for you. Serikali kuyatolea mwongozo matamko ya Makonda Mnyeti. That is the story that you want to follow also inside Mwananchi. If you're waking up in Tanzania on page 2, madai ya watumishi yazua jambo chuo kikuu Dar es Salaam. That is the story as well. Let me show you what we do have also on the front page of the Standard. I'll show you the hard copy. I failed to actually Download that quickly. Uhuru turns his office around in final term. That is what we have on the front page of the Standard this morning. New blood. President replaces AG. He inherited from Kibaki. Elevates longtime friend Nje, I should say, and sends law advisor Abdikadir on diplomatic mission. That story tucked away on page 6 and 7 of the Standard this morning. So those are your dailies today. Make sure you grab a copy of the Daily Nation. You grab a copy of the Star and the Business Daily, the Standard, whichever paper, as we normally say here, that really floats your boat. But for now, let's put this horse into full run by looking at the highlights. Right, new changes, of course, we'll give you all the gritty details as far. Githum Muigai is no longer the Attorney General. Courts stops SDA charge construction in Karen amidst raging row with residents. Ethiopia frees opposition leader Bekele Geraba. And Congo violence forces over 22,000 to flee to Uganda. Hello, good morning. I'm Debarl Clement Inea. Professor Githum Muigai has resigned as Attorney General, and President Uhuru Kenyatta has named Court of Appeal President Justice Kihara Kariuki as his replacement. The president announced this, among others, that will also see former Solicitor General Nje Muturi move to State House as Deputy Chief of Staff, with the president's lawyer Ken Ogeto nominated as his replacement, I should say. And we have Sheila Sende with that story.
After more than 6 years in the state law office, Professor Githum Muigai hangs it up as the government's chief legal advisor. He was retained when the president named his cabinet, but as he was not known to be a favorite in the upper tiers of power, insiders say his exit was only a matter of time. The president confirmed receiving his resignation, saying he stepped down voluntarily.
I wish to place on record, on my own behalf and on behalf of the people of Kenya, our gratitude for the committed and dedicated service that Professor Muigai has accorded to our nation over the last 6.5 years.
Before he became AG, Professor Muigai had served in the now defunct Constitution of Kenya Review Commission and at the UN as Special Rapporteur on contemporary forms of racism, xenophobia and related intolerance. He was appointed by former President Mwai Kibaki to take over from Amos Wako on the 27th of August 2011. He will remain in office until his replacement is approved by Parliament. The president settled on President of the Court of Appeal, Justice Paul Kihara, to fill his shoes, a man considered to have close ties to the Kibaki State House. In the changes announced, Solicitor General Nje Muturi moves to State House as Deputy Chief of Staff to work under Nzioka Waita. His replacement...
I have also today forwarded the names of Kennedy Ogeto for the position of Solicitor General.
He's been an advocate of the High Court for the past 24 years and is the managing partner in the law firm Ogeto Otachi and Company Advocates. The firm was involved in the defense team that represented President Kenyatta in the case against him at the International Criminal Court. The president has also nominated Patrick Gishohi, former clerk of the National Assembly, former Kenyatta University Vice-Chancellor Professor Olive Mugenda, and former Agriculture CS Felix Koskei to the Judicial Service Commission. The nominees will have to be approved by Parliament's Justice and Legal Affairs Committee. Former constitutional advisor to the president, Abdikadir Mohammed, has been nominated Kenya's ambassador to South Korea. Sheila Sendeo, NTV.
NASA running mate Kalonzo Musyoka now says that had he taken the oath on the 30th of January, then he could have been hastily prosecuted for treason and either hanged or barred from vying for the presidency in 2022. Musyoka, who was speaking in Athi River after meeting with women leaders in the Wiper Democratic Movement, says the 4 NASA principals are conducting an audit of what happened when NASA leader Raila Odinga was sworn in so that they know how to proceed.
My prosecution was to be hastened and impose very difficult bail conditions. Yeah, like deposit your passport, all right? You cannot leave the country. Yeah, so these are some of the things we want to take stock of, and then of course make sure, because it may be a very easy thing to obtain a conviction. Yeah, in a matter like this, then of course you are clearly shut out of 2022, because everybody thinks about 2022. That is if we get there. I have personally struggled at night over this matter of swearing, kwa sababu watu wananitupia machafu, wanasema watermelon, wanasema sijui nini, yeah, and I'm not any of that. Yeah, the watermelon is a very good fruit, but that's not me. That's not me. That's not me. Why is it they're forgetting what I've done in 2013 and 2017? Yeah, why all of a sudden jump to 2007? Yeah, even then it was my right to run for presidency.
Now, the Jubilee Party is moving to punish legislators who do not toe the party line. President Uhuru Kenyatta instructed the party's secretariat to take action against those legislators, beginning with those who missed the party's parliamentary group meeting at State House. The warning came as 3 rebels MPs failed to honor the president's invitation for the meeting ahead of Parliament's reopening.
PG is an organ of the party, and therefore decisions made by this PG are decisions of the party. This PG, as has been said, is recognized by the standing orders. The standing orders are a product of the Constitution. And therefore, when we meet like the way we do, we are discharging not just party matters, we are also discharging constitutional issues.
We must all contribute to the party in order for the party's activities to be able to continue, because we can no longer have political parties that just become alive at the time of an election. We need party activities on the ground. It will help you when the time comes. PGs are not voluntary, they are mandatory. They are mandatory. And as a consequence, we have also equally agreed that going forward, the party, through the SG, will also take punitive action against those who do not attend without good reason.
Each one of us must take the PG with the seriousness it deserves. When we call a PG, it is important for all of us to come so that we can prosecute whatever matters that are before us.
And we will not allow that. We are not going to relent. We are still the chairs of our specific committees, because the purported vote of no confidence did not happen. They didn't follow the law.
Now, the National Environmental Management Authority, the Nairobi County Government, and a senior government official are on the spot for the controversial construction of a church in a residential area in Karen, Nairobi. The suburb's residential zone has increasingly been spotting construction of apartments and commercial facilities, to the discomfort of the residents who say it is against the law. NTV's Seth Olale visited various parts of the upmarket suburb where there is not only buildings of structures but also discontent and claims of corruption in government.
The cleared single-acre piece of land that sits in wait for building. The heavy machinery now at rest after its earth-moving activities in preparation for the Seventh-day Adventist-owned structure that is to host a church and other rooms set aside for various uses. The controversial construction on Mukoma Road in Nairobi's Karen suburb has elicited outrage among residents. Through the Karen Langata District Association, they have taken legal action to stop the construction. Leading conservationist and ivory trade investigator Esbon Bradley Martin, who was murdered at his Karen home about a week ago, had initiated and mobilized residents to file their appeal against the construction of the church, which borders his 20-acre home.
They share a fence with this project. He was the first to raise the alarm. He let us know and we did the necessary. He mobilized his area residents, they raised some funds and we went to court. But we do not see the tragic event as connected to this SDA thing.
Last week, the National Environmental Tribunal ordered the immediate halting of the construction until the case is heard and determined. However, Residents claim that construction activities at the site of the proposed religious facility continued despite the contractor being issued with a court order.
We don't know. Is it a church? Is it a retreat center? Is it cottages? What is it? And it's such a small piece of land, 1 acre. What can you fit there as an institution in Karen for that? We don't have water, we don't have enough power, yet we want to host about 400 people in 1 acre, even if it's for 1 or 2 days. There's something wrong with that.
Current residents claim that the ownership of the plot on which the construction started never changed and that the actual title is not placed under the church's name. The National Environmental Management Authority, NEMA, is partly at the heart of the residents' laments. They decry the granting of a license for the construction of the church in a residential area without following the right procedure, which includes public participation from immediate neighbors. The county government of Nairobi is also on the spot for authorizing the construction to commence without following the 1 house per acre community rule that binds current residents.
If you look at the public participation process through the environmental issue, none of that has happened. You just appear with papers. You have people who sign who are Maasai herdsmen, workers, people who are just passing through signing questionnaires, and that is taken by NEMA to mean that the residents took part in some kind of public participation process. Yet the association has given the developers, the consultants, a way for us to get in touch with the residents. We bring them together with the developer, and they never follow that. They just appear with licenses from both NEMA and the county.
According to the Karen Langata District Association, 70% of the problems they have been facing are drawn from religious organizations. The church, which has been implicated, says it cannot comment on the matter since there is a court order touching on the issue. Apart from the religious facility that was under construction, apartments and commercial buildings, including a petrol station next to a school, have been sprouting up in residential zones, leaving residents worried and feeling helpless in light of contravention of the set rules. The proposed religious facility that was under construction here in Karen is just an example of the seemingly disorder that has highlighted Karen in the past decade. Seth Olale, NTV, Karen.
The government has denied, that is the government has denied that Tanzania's move to ban 5,000-day-old chicks from Kenya had to do with the trade dispute between the countries. Tanzania's government said the action was taken because the importers, who were Tanzanian, illegally smuggled the chicks out of Kenya via the Namanga border and without documentation. The chicks were then destroyed in order to curb the spread of bird flu. 3 months ago, Tanzania banned 6,400-day-old chicks impounded at the same border post. Representatives from both countries met in Mombasa recently to iron out any thorny issue or issues around trade, and government downplays claims that there is still a tussle between the two neighbors. Now, over 22,000 people fled Congo to Uganda last week following a surge of ethnic violence in the northeast, raising the total number of arrivals to about 34,000 since the start of the year, according to the United Nations Refugee Agency. At least 30 people have been killed in fighting between Hema herders and Lendu farmers in the province of... that we can take us through the stories of the day, looking at what is happening in Ethiopia, Congo right now, and of course in South Africa, but beginning here at home as well. This is what is headlining the front page of the Daily Nation today. New circle of power. We ran that story for you comprehensively by Sheila Sendeo. And this is how it looks. Githu Muigai, a Kibaki appointee, finally paves the way for Uhuru loyalists, right? So the loyals are surrounding Uhuru Kenyatta as depicted by Daily Nation today. You can follow this story inside the Daily Nation. And this also is on the front page of the Star. Is Uhuru going for Supreme Court? That's a probing question from the Star. President changes his legal advisory team in readiness, I should say, for second term takeoff. Attorney General Githu Muigai out as President picks Appeal Court Judge Kihara Mwangi and names new nominees to Judicial Service Commission. This story continues on page 4 and 5 of the Star. Let's get to hear from our panelists we have with us. As I mentioned earlier, Professor Naomi Damba, who's an expert on defense and foreign policy, also the Vice Chancellor of KC University. Also, we do have with us Ambassador Erastus Mwencha, who is the former African Union Deputy Chair. Also do have with us Dr. Mumunzao, who is a governance and security strategist. And we do have with us as well Dr. Hassan Kanenje, who is the director of the Horn Institute. Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
All right, let's just begin with you, Erastus Mwencha, looking at this particular development right now. Having an AG resigning, this has never happened in the history of this country, if history may bear me well, but you can stand to be corrected as well. What does it really tell us about the current administration and maybe the relationships or the relationships therein when it comes to a seamless running government?
Well, I may not be able to comment on the current relationship, but let me say up initial that I know Githu very well. And therefore, I probably would be not the best person to comment because I've worked with him on matters international, on 1 or 2 programs. Looking at the Constitution of Kenya, Article 156, which provides for the Office of Attorney General.
Yes.
It is very scanty. It doesn't provide mechanisms on a number of aspects. For instance, how the Attorney General leaves office. And even, as you know, there's been quite a lot of debate in the air as to whether he should have been sworn in again because security of tenure is limited to the current positions he holds. In other words, his security of tenure doesn't transcend administrations. But the fact that he was retained after having been appointed by President Kibaki,
yes,
and he chose to leave at this point in time is something perhaps worth looking at. What could have changed his mind? Because the president is in the process of now making up, constituting his cabinet, and since he was retained and then chooses to leave at this point in time, it must then be either a very recent development or he's been thinking about it and he came to a point, he says, this is opportune time for now for me to quit. But I don't want to speculate. As I said, somebody I know is probably better that I get it from the horse.
All right, but what sort of vibe, so to speak, does it send to the public when you have such a very high office? You know, him being the custodian of the Constitution, defending the country. You've seen him saying that, yeah, I've been to the ICC, not to really talk about or defend anyone, but just to put a case for Kenya as well. What does it portend for people's perception on what is going on with the government, especially with the resigning of the Attorney General? Professor?
Debarl, several things I think the public in particular need to be sensitive about. One is the president has proposed significant 4 pillars of development. And what is going to happen with those 4 pillars and what matters the most is who surrounds the president is going to determine whether or not the president succeed on the pillars he has enumerated. We are aware that President Kennedy in history and recently President Obama had people in his cabinet that are not necessarily yes people, but they're people of significant, they're people who contributed immensely for the success of those two people I just mentioned. And therefore, the kind of people you surround yourself with, in my opinion, can determine the kind of success that the president will have in implementing his proposed agenda. And my hope is that the administration not be so consumed with the question of supporting friends or giving rewards to friends or diminishing the power of state office. We want a law and order country. We want a civil, organized, committed, disciplined government that is going to be consistent, working for the people of Kenya. And therefore, one is the president has the right to appoint these people who surround him closely, and he has a reason why he does what he does. And you know, it should not be really open to too much to speculation, because like ambassadors say, the mind transcends two powers of government, and you can stop him at any time. So we don't know what is behind this kind of thing. But my reason is it better be the kind of objective that will enhance us in Kenya.
Right. Dr. Kanyenje, it appears that from the perception that we've had from you know, the public is that also Attorney General Githu Muigai was a frustrated man in this position, because he was not really accorded the support that he should have been accorded. And much of this, all his functions, you know, were a bit ceremonial. He was not given the backup. Much of this was going to the Solicitor General, so to speak. So was this just maybe, you know, a taking time bomb waiting to explode, a tinder waiting to explode, a tinderbox?
Debarl, you know, I think in a charged political atmosphere that we live in this country, there is always a temptation to try and read mischief in every action, or perhaps read some game playing behind any government or opposition move. Now, and I agree with Professor, I wouldn't really want to speculate. Now, three possibilities, at least according to me. Either he does not share the administration's vision of the second term, or he's uncomfortable in terms of the work environment, or he's just a man who thinks he has served his country honorably and it's time to give way to someone else. And so I really wouldn't want to speculate, because none of us have complete information. And in terms of working in government, people are always going to be uncomfortable at one point or another. I don't think those are normally grounds, you know, to resign, especially if you're patriotic and you really love your country and you want to make a difference. But there are those who might think perhaps the forces against them, they're too powerful and they're constraining the ability to be able to function effectively. But at this stage, I really wouldn't want to speculate.
All right, let's hear from Dr. Mumunzao.
Yeah, Debarl, we are building a democracy. And when we are trying to, you know, consolidate our democracy, the best place is not to look at in terms of individuals, but rather institutions. We are trying to institutionalize our national processes and organizations and ways of doing things. And so it wouldn't bother me much. Professor Githu has exited in a very honorable manner. He was with the head of state right there, and the head of state accepted his resignation, and he's probably moving into other you know, domains within his career outlook. So what is important is not the individual, but rather the office. And I think given the kind of volatile situations we've had in the general scene of politics and administration, he has performed pretty well. He has been able to advise government through very difficult times, through the Hague cases and all this. And I think that is the kind of thing we need to see with building our institutions and bettering it. Of course, there's always room for improvement and so on. And I think that's the way to look at it. And we should be able to consolidate our democracy going forward.
Right. So what do you think about this headline? Is Uhuru going for Supreme Court? That's a probing question. Yeah, people are speculating and saying, oh, and you guys are saying, oh.
Well,
this was a statement that we shall revisit.
That's right.
So is it a complete overhaul?
No, Debarl, what I would say is that in a democracy, one thing that makes a liberty work is also order. You need a good balance between order and liberty. If liberty is left without bounds and without processes of trying to limit in a way, then it loses, it loses direction. But in the same breath, when a judge orders mandamus, certiorari, or rule of law, or habeas corpus, produce the suspect in court in 24 hours, dead or alive, that is a judge making an order to protect a citizen from the excesses of the executive. And what we have is democratic space here. And we have to respect that. We don't have to read that way each time that the executive is doing its part, the courts are doing their part, and then we all then construe that to be a tug of war, or one is interfering with the other. That is just the doctrines of checks and balances, balance of power at play. And that is the way to look at it. We have a lot of democratic space. We have to temper it with order and let every institution be given its leeway.
All right. Also, there's a probing question of why, or maybe a suggestion on why Githu had to go. This is on the People Daily. Why Githu had to go? Supreme Court ruling that overturned Uhuru's election victory in August may have left fingerprints of omission by AG's office, and that is what is here on the front page of the People Daily this morning. You can also follow that, which is fully tucked away, the comprehensive story on page 6 of the People Daily today. I can see Professor Noah Midama wants to chime in on this as well.
Debarl, we cannot pretend to be a democratic country if we do not follow democratic principles. Dr. Nisau enumerated a few minutes ago about check and balance. Legislative, executive, and judiciary have got to balance each other in a democratic country. Government of the people, for the people, and by the people. And the point is sometimes I hear some really erroneous pronouncement. We are going to go after you. We're going to destroy you. You know, these are nonsense in a democratic society. We are a government of law and order, and therefore legislative folks cannot intrude in the judicial role, or the executive cannot intrude in the judicial role for us to really have a balanced country. And therefore people need to step back and look at and really ask a question, where do we want to go as a country? That is the question of the moment, and that's what the administration need to be really consistent about, and also the legislative need to do the same.
All right. Wanchi, you want to comment?
No, I think the matter has been ably covered by my fellow panelists. You know, we live in a society that is, with social media, full of speculation. The second point is that we also live in a society, unfortunately, where honorable exit is not a norm. Unless people say, you know, are being sacked or pressure to leave, people then read a lot of things which may not be true. I mean, as it has been said, he could be moving on to something else. Probably could have had shared conscience that felt that he's not serving, you know, to his likes. And so I hate to kind of read somebody's mind when you are not privy to certain facts, and which perhaps I'm able to access. And therefore, that's why I think it's always good to be cautious when commenting on such a matter, when you could say something in public which is not true.
All right. Okay, just maybe also to take you to page 6 of the People Daily there, where we are tucked away these words before we take a short break, that we have a day says that claims that emerged of infiltration by the judiciary's top echelons by the international, let me start from actually the top. The judges who ruled to derail the Uhuru victory were Chief Justice David Maraga and his deputy Philomena Mwilu and Justices Smokin Monjala and Isaac Lenaola. Claims later emerged of infiltration of judiciary's top echelon by the International Development Law Organization and hostile civil society groups, the effects of which the state may have not been fully aware. Most of the research and briefs used by NASA lawyers to convince the Supreme Bench were said to have been products of IDLO and the hostile NGOs. In the aftermath of the petition, Raila Odinga, the AG's and Solicitor General's offices were said to have been on the spot, seen as having slept on the job. In the same period, pending of fresh presidential election on October the 26th, NASA lawyers came up with several litigations that appeared to catch Jubilee off guard. Those in the know intimated it was just a matter of time before changes fell on the State Law Office and Department of Justice. That is somewhere on page 6 of the People Daily today. Reason may be behind the resignation of Attorney General Getham Muigai. Right, we'll take a short break right now. When we come back, we continue with the conversation at pace. Of course, looking at what is happening here around the country, between Kenya and Tanzania, especially with the chicks that are being banned. What is the problem? We want to find out, is there a much deeper undercurrent to this than what it really appears, right, on our eyes as well. So don't go far away. Let's take a short break right now, then we'll start back with more. 5, and we continue with the conversation with our panelists that I've created first time this morning with Professor Naomi Damba, who is the Vice Chancellor of KC University, also an expert on defense and foreign policy. We have with us as well Balozi Erastus Mwencha, who is a former Deputy Chair of the African Union. Also, we do have with us Dr. Mumun Zhao, a governance and security strategist. Also, we do have with us as well Dr. Hassan Kanenje, who is a director at the Horn Institute. Gentlemen, let's continue with the conversation. I think we've wrapped up, unless you have anything to say on the new appointments so far. And, of course, the Office of the Attorney General, right?
Let me make an adage, Debarl. Just one adage.
Yes, please.
In the 30s, the United States and the rest of Western Europe, North America, experienced the Depression. You remember the Great Depression of the 1930s.
Mm-hmm.
And the person who was very instrumental in pulling out the United States out of the Depression was President Roosevelt. Mm-hmm. And he came up with what he called his New Deal. And it's something, every head of state would like to come up with a formula, like the way President Uhuru has come up with his the
Big Four agenda.
The Big Four agenda. And what President Roosevelt did was that traditionally it was said that there was a dichotomy between administration and politics. Mm-hmm. But Roosevelt worked with people who believed in his agenda. Mm. And they closed that gap in ways through which the public servants involved were able to move his agenda, the New Deal, putting money in people's pocket and getting America out of the Depression. And if there's a lot of sincerity in the kind of moves that are being made, the head of state is on course with it. I think it's a good thing. He needs to be allowed to work with people he has full trust, people who believe in his vision, and they can move it. And I'm not talking about that professor was not carrying his vision, but what I'm saying is that the kind of moves he's making, let's give him leeway between now and 2022 and see if he's able to push through the agenda. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because that sounds quite transformative, and I think there's room for that. And I think given a chance, his bureaucratic machine can make a difference.
Right. Yeah. Okay, let's move to Tanzania. The story, of course, banning the chicks from Kenya, about 5,000 of them, and previously we saw 6,400 of them being banned by Tanzania. And the government has come out to starkly deny that this is not truly pegged on a trade dispute between us and Tanzania. What is happening, especially when it comes to the diplomatic row that we are seeing between Kenya and Tanzania, not only with the chicks, also some of our citizens in Tanzania have been affected adversely by Tanzanians' authority, looking also at the herd of cattle that I think were also confiscated by Tanzania as well. It seems there is a blood that is actually coming up between us and Tanzania.
Debarl, if you talk about trade and look at Kenya, favorable trade balance. Yes. The closest and the largest trade partners we have are the East African, mm-hmm. Uganda and Tanzania, being very critical. I have two friends who are permanent secretaries in yes. Tanzania, mm-hmm. Whom I've spent a lot of time with. One of them, of course, was in Mombasa, mm-hmm. Discussing about this very topic. The question is not bad blood. We need to have a thorough understanding. What can Kenya sell to Tanzania, mm-hmm. and what can Kenya buy from Tanzania? Yes. We need to have a clear articulation in East Africa, mm-hmm. and therefore, when you sell chicks, the question is, can Tanzania produce chicks? And if that is a forbidden item, then why are you crossing the border mm-hmm. With the chicks? So it might be as simple as that, or misunderstanding, and let's not go deeper into bad blood between the two countries.
You don't think so? There is a sort of a tension simmering between us and Tanzania.
Yeah, trade is governed by rules. There are two frameworks that govern trade between, say, Kenya and the neighbors. One is the WTO rules, The second one is the East African Community Protocol on Trade. And in all this, there is a provision for trade dispute mechanisms when there is a dispute on trade. When you look at the issue of the chicken, one can imagine that perhaps one of the areas could be violated in terms of trade is if the sanitary and the phytosanitary rules are not observed meticulously, because when we import such products, they could carry with them disease. And therefore, as an exporter, you are required to undertake certain protocols, inspect them, and have a certificate of inspection. And if the importer looks at those protocols and find they are in line, they cannot then proceed to carry out certain actions like what we see now. It could then be that there is something not right that has been done, because under the East African Community, unless it is a protected item and therefore country notified that this kind of product shall not be imported, then, and somebody has gone ahead and violated it, then of course there is something here that needs to be talked about. And so, like Professor Midamba said, it is important to get at the root of the matter. But I mean, it's also a matter of public record that our trade, as he said, is robust. This is a region that has got a lot of potential. If you look at trade flows between Tanzania and Kenya, is very good and has a lot of promises, and therefore we need to nurture it. And we shouldn't allow events to cloud out all these issues. Perhaps we should prosecute it carefully to find out what could have gone wrong. And if then we find it is the exporter who was wrong, then let's take remedial measures from our side to make sure that doesn't happen. If it is Tanzania, there are mechanisms that we need to follow up to make sure such a thing doesn't happen.
Yeah, let's hear from Dr. Khanende.
Yeah, you know, it's been interesting because in the last couple of years, even though Tanzania has a history of being a reluctant member of this marriage called the East African Community, and they tend always to be suspicious sometimes of our motives and sometimes our ability to actually ignore the concerns of others around us, you know, which is not very helpful. Now, we've discussed on this panel before some of the things that have happened, you know, between Kenya and Tanzania. And, you know, for me, I would say, you know, when adults in the village are not talking and are not discussing, people tend to do silly and childish things. Because while Tanzania is entitled to prevent the spread of bird flu in this country, you know, there are other ways of actually establishing that, because you can test those chicks. You don't have to kill them. You know, however, the fact that that is what is being resorted to, it shows you some breakdown. There's something which is not being discussed. And I think these countries need to sit together seriously, and the leaders need to engage each other a lot more often. And in part because that's just one issue that we actually have with Tanzania, you know. Right now, we are not at a place where we should be diplomatic with Tanzania, neither do we have the type of influence that we had over these countries and over our neighbors just in recent years. And so that is something we should actually think so seriously as a country, and perhaps about time we started talking and stopped complaining.
All right,
right,
yes.
Debarl, thank you. I think what is important is to understand that states don't interact and don't think with their hearts like people. I know matters of procedure or circumstantial issues sometimes create a little bit of diplomatic bottlenecks here and there. But diplomats don't speak the kind of language we are talking sometimes. You know, they burnt our cheeks and such things. There's a way that states interact. Ambassador has elucidated a number of things that are fundamental about how far we've taken our common market protocol arrangement. And in fact, the EAC has a broader vision than even the EU, because they wanted to go beyond a common currency into a federation. The EU just want to mostly go up to the common currency. That is at least the framework. So, you know, the idea is that we have a great vision that our founding fathers and former leaders of our common countries have wanted. There could be a bit of idiosyncratic variables that could be at play, squabbles here and there, but that does not mean that the house is on fire, and that is not the way to look at it. Tanzania is the second biggest trading partner with Kenya here after Uganda. And we are in good talking terms. So, in fact, these were Tanzanian citizens who are importing these chicks and so on. They may want to talk more on matters of procedure, like, you know, test the chicks and how to dispose. Because one thing is to, like when you say ban them, it's just about to sanitize and not let them go through, but they probably do want to take chances. But these are things that can be done in a way that they don't raise eyebrows or raise unnecessary controversy. But I think our diplomatic relations are on the brighter side for the most part. And you cannot wish away your neighbor. We need your neighbors, they can't move. And we have a lot of historical, cultural relations, and that's why we are in an East African community and so on. And that's the way to go.
Right.
There are not two ways about we have to manage it.
But with the fact that we had around 6,500 or 6,400 also cattle being auctioned in Tanzania, and the stock excuse that you know, they could be infected. I mean, it really flies in the face of what now they're telling us. Also, this bird flu, maybe the chicks are infected with bird flu, because then if they are, if the cattle are infected as well, why auction them? Why not ban them, right? That will be the question. But let's say from Professor Naomi Damba.
You know, Debarl, the PS for Trade who was in Uganda, who was in Mombasa the other day, is a very good friend of mine. You know, he's coming to my village. We make nyama choma. We are very relaxed. We are, you know, understandable. He's a professor of distinction who knows Kenya in and out. The point is we must respect the protocol. You know, we spend a lot of energy and time with the EU people, with China, with the US. And those trade balance between Kenya and China is like up and down. America up and down, European up and down.
Yes.
The only favorable trade balance we have is within the East Africa, like my friend Kisao just said. Now, so if this is the favorable trade balance, is it not incumbent on us to spend as much energy as we are spending with China, such that we understand the psyche of Tanzania people, their ways and areas where we can compromise very easily? We are not doing that. We are underestimating the ability of our neighbor and what they need to do. And, you know, then we're flying in and say they ban our chicken. You know, tomorrow they sold our cows. The point is, what exactly is going on the border between these two countries? Are people following protocol? That is the underlying thing that the Kenyan team need to understand.
Okay. And of course, we have also here tucked away that according to the BBC, Magufuli, who was speaking in Kagera, this is way back in last year, region said Tanzania is not a veterinarian field for livestock, and he will take livestock in strict control of any domestic animal, right? This is just in light of what we're just talking about. Maybe to wrap it up, we can hear from Khanenje finally on this. So there's no diplomatic tension or diplomatic trade tension arising between Kenya and Tanzania.
I think
that is what we can conclude.
Yeah, I think there's no substantial tension, you know, so to speak. I just think we've not really been doing a very good job in trying to make sure that we stick by our agreements, but we also follow through with a lot of things. And as Professor just mentioned, and I had mentioned it earlier, we've had a tendency, you know, Tanzania and Uganda, they are our two largest trading partners. And sometimes we have a tendency of actually ignoring some of their needs and wishes, especially in the against the background that even within the ESC, you know, Kenya is the one that enjoys the advantage for the most part up until today. And so I think we should also be sensitive to that and be able to deal with our neighbors with respect.
All right.
Just one word on that. In trying to understand this story better, it is important for us to look at what are the trade flows like. Are we just trading in these two products? The answer obviously is no. Has there been any trade dispute in other products? Are we still exporting without any issues some of those products? What could be the underlying causes then, particularly for these two, particularly related to agricultural products?
Yes.
Globally, and this is all over the world, agriculture sector is very heavily protected because of the potential, dangers that it poses, whether disease, but also it's a security sector, because feeding people means you must, many countries, I mean, look at Japan, very small country, doesn't have land, but protects agriculture very heavily to make sure that whatever they have can be able to go a long way. And so I think it's important for us to look at this to see that we develop harmonious relationship with the neighbors, to encourage trade flow, to show, as somebody mentioned earlier on, that this trade is not one way. In fact, when you look at the statistics, I've been privileged to have been part of the trade arrangement under COMESA, and the East Africa community and all that. And I know that when people look at this, they conclude very quickly that, oh, Kenya is a more industrialized country and therefore would. But if you look at what we're importing from Tanzania, it's quite substantial. And this is dynamic. I mean, Tanzania natural gas, yes. We could be importing from there. We're importing electricity from Ethiopia and all this. And what countries needs to start understanding, when you come to the table, you may have a deficit with A, but you have a surplus with E. But at the end of the day, you are a win-win situation. And that's what we should encourage. All it requires is to remove the fear, but also develop understanding.
Right. So we have the new cabinet secretary, that is Monica Juma, Ambassador Monica Juma, who has her work cut out so far on how she can try and streamline and try to, iron out the kinks, of course, that we have right now with Tanzania as far as this is concerned. Thank you very much. Let's now drill deep and try to see what we have in South Africa. And if my director, Mark, may just pick up this particular editorial cartoon that we have today in the Daily Nation. This is how NC is trying to pull down the statue of Zuma, who is also saying, no, I'll not resign. Oh, we need to give me more time. 6 months down the line is when now I should actually tender my resignation. But it's high time, according to the South Africa, that his tenure has been checkered with so much corruption, so much unethical leadership. So many, if you look at some of the parliamentary proceedings that we do have, especially the State of the Union address or a State of the Nation address, you see the opposition really castigating Zuma on all manner of ills, from rape cases and the HIV/AIDS, claims that he can heal through I don't know what sort of showering, and I mean some outrageous things that we can say has happened during his tenure as well. But now ANC recalling Zuma. This is the second president who has been recalled by the party because of non-performance. What does it tell? And I think this is the same question that we were posing to some of the panelists that we had yesterday here. What does it portend as far as democracy is concerned? Right? Are we looking at South Africa as a bastion of democracy? That we have political parties which are so strong that if one is not really performing, then you're actually recalled, as it is then for Zuma?
Debarl, this is a tragic event of an unproportional situation and has a far-reaching implication for the continent of Africa. In 1979, Henry Kissinger did a study of South Africa. And the issue at that time was what clear role that the US need to play. Should they support the apartheid regime and continue to sustain the suppression of millions of black people? Or should they moderate the apartheid situation and be sensitive to the need of the masses of local people? And one thing that came clear is that the men on the street, the men and women on the street was very angry. And they were not quite clear the role that Mandela will play to moderate the anger that has been created and the vacuum that has been created for years and years. And so U.S. chose to moderate the apartheid regime without openly opposing them out. And consequently, we had a resolution where Mandela was released and Mandela became the president. And then we begin the role of nation building, which was seen as very peaceful. Several years later, we have this crisis. And in my trip to South Africa, the men and women on the street are still very angry. Their life has not changed. There are many by millions, and they blame the African regime as well as the white regime that still continue to benefit. The consequence is very serious here, Debarl. Zuma still have incredible support in this KwaZulu province and you know, the people of Natal. He has manipulated this situation right from the beginning, as we can remember, is the one who was instrumental in pushing out Thabo Mbeki out of the situation. Here's the thing about
yes.
The relationship between Zuma and ANC is very crucial on how they handle it. If they seem to push him out, he's going to back down and he's going to anchor down. And really, three things that's going to happen. Parliament will have to pass a vote of no confidence, which will lead to anywhere. Secondly, impeach him. And that is a long process, and you cannot guarantee what will happen. And then, lastly, Zuma may try to stay put and then create a serious national crisis of unproportion, which will unearth all the historical issues, and then we can see calamity of South Africa. South African leadership was expected to take on the leadership of Africa, just like the US took from the Second World War leadership of what we call the free world.
Yes.
Europe have their own leadership. Asians have their own leadership. Except if Zuma become like Kabila or South Sudan, then who do we look for in Africa as a leader? So we have a very serious implication here.
All right, let's hear from Rastus.
I agree to most part what the professor said, but I would take a slight different position in one or two areas. Let me start with the economy. It's true that if you look at South Africa's economy, which was the largest economy in Africa, at the dawn of post-apartheid, South Africa has now slipped to number 3, behind Nigeria and Egypt. Now, there are reasons for that. Partly is what the professor said. One is because the old economy only served about 5 million people. The new economy is trying to serve now close to 60 million people. That model is more of distribution than production.
Yes.
The production equation has not been adequately addressed. And therefore, this is why the economy has even slipped down. If you look at how the economy large it was at one point almost $500 billion. I mean, $500 billion. Today is just under 300 billion. That is, it has taken a toll. And therefore, there is that hit in the economy, people being poorer. And one forgets the history of that economy. The second one is stewardship.
Yes.
But here again, let me link it to lack of synchronization of the electoral process of the party and of the presidency. We said this last week, that there is no way you can run two centers of power in a country. You know, fahali wawili hawaishi sisi moja. That is very clear. You now have a leader of ANC who's Cyril Ramaphosa. And Cyril Ramaphosa is poising himself to go into an election. Yet, the state presidency is under Zuma.
Yes.
Now, that is a problem, because he still has, and this is where stewardship comes up. Unfortunately, during his stewardship as a president, this has not, it has been dogged with some scandals, the state capture and the rest.
Yes.
And therefore, people are saying, let him get out. And therefore, the ANC cannot march forward, because if you look at the performance of the results, in 2009, ANC scored over 70% of the electorate, just under 70% or around 70%. In the last election, it was just over 50%. Now, that tells you that the ANC is declining in popularity. And therefore, the party must then address what are the fundamental fault lines within the party. And part of it then is seen as weaknesses. One of them, of course, is the unmet expectations. The people thought with the new dispensation, they would now have land, they would have jobs, but forgetting that the cake that was there was only serving a small proportion. The moment you spread it, it's not going to be adequate. And so that is a fundamental problem. But here is where now I see the situation forward. There are two ways that, three paths to this crisis now. I think what President Zuma probably would like to look for is a more assured way that when he leaves office, he's not going to have a date with courts and live in courts and perhaps wherever else. And that is probably not coming, because if ANC seems to give him that guarantee, then people will say, look, you are abetting and promoting what was seen as corruption. The second aspect, he probably sees that the party he has a mandate from the people who elected him, and the party structure cannot override that mandate, and therefore technically he can still stay put. But then the danger is ANC will split. He has support, and therefore ANC must handle him very carefully, because the moment you try to bundle him out of the office, ANC can break up, and with the weak support that still manifests from the previous election, the others will be ready to take on, and the ANC could be seeing its worst scenario. So there are all these problems.
Yeah, but we've just heard from the Secretary General of ANC that is a foregone conclusion, and there is no backing down on this particular decision, that he has to go, right? So it seems that is really cast in stone right now.
Going is going.
Yes.
The question, this is an end game. There's no question, it's an end game. The question then, how does this game end? It could end in his terms. It could end in the terms of course, red lines have been drawn. What now remains to be done is to see how it's prosecuted.
This is sort of a deja vu as well. It's not the first time we can see a recalling of a president. You mentioned Thabo Mbeki that was recalled, but how then did ANC fare after the recalling also of Thabo Mbeki?
That's where I took a slight position from what you were saying, that, well, it looks like it's not a very good situation. I think, to me, it's democracy at play. Unfortunately, there is lack of synchronization of the party leadership and the state leadership. If this had been synchronized properly, we wouldn't be witnessing this. And actually, they have recognized it. They are even saying, in the new dispensation, they probably will have to synchronize these two positions.
Thank you. And we can see the party politics really shaping also the politics of the country, where everything is done within the context of the party ideology, the context of the party principles, the context of our party manifesto, and if you're not really towing the line, then it means you have to go. How can we extrapolate some lessons from this as Kenya right now? Because our parties, they're not really, we've heard from the president saying even, yeah, you know, we want to make this party a robust party, not a party that is just a political tool for you to gain a seat during electioneering time, right? But even after that, post, how do we know that we have a party, we have the rules, and we follow the rules of the particular party? So what lessons can we learn here, that if you're not performing, a party, you know, is actually over and above you, and it's a final arbiter in determining whether you will be in that office or not. It's not about, you know, people, yes, voted for you, but it's also ultimately to the ticket of the party that they gave you to earn this particular seat. What lessons do we get from here?
Should I pass it to Dr. Kanenje, or should I, let me say something?
You want to pass it? Yeah. You want to collect your thoughts?
Yes,
then, yeah, please. All right, let's have Dr. Kanenje.
Yes. You know, in the wake of the ongoing crisis, especially crisis of leadership in Africa, the last couple of days I had to think a little bit about what leadership is. And you know, leadership is an ability to create an inspiring vision and be able to motivate others to reach that vision. It is taking on tasks and challenges that affect society, not because they're easy, but because they are hard. It's being that thing in us that dares us to dream, not for ourselves, but for others, not for politics, but for posterity. And when I use that standard to measure, even just given the history of South Africa, what Zuma has been in the last couple of years, it's been a disgrace. He way falls short of that. Now, we know that Zuma came to power and hounded out Thabo Mbeki because of Zulu nationalism. The same nationalism that fought so fiercely against the ANC at the time it used to be the Inkatha Freedom Party under Mangosuthu Buthelezi. Now, what Ambassador is actually attesting to is there is a danger of the split in ANC, in part because there's still a lot of heightened tensions, especially given the emergency of Zulu nationalism, that also informed the rise of Malemas and the group.
Yes.
Yeah. And so part of the party might argue that this is a foregone conclusion. But the truth is, number one, Zuma is still entitled to be in office until I think next year, right? Number two, the realities of bringing back the past, especially within the ANC, might actually split the party and lead South Africa into a non-path. And so this is something that has to be looked at very carefully. Now, coming back to the point about political parties. Political parties on this continent, and especially in this country, have been, at best, ridiculous, in part because they're very seasonal. We don't create political parties as institutions that can actually have an ideology and advance it beyond 5-year term. Now, the president did allude yesterday, I think, emphasized the need of building his own coalition and making sure that party survives. It's very critical we actually build those parties. If you just look at the history of this country since 1992, you're going to see we've had probably 100 political parties up to date. We need to move away from that and move towards more ideologically based political parties. Build institutions that are actually strong enough to be able to deliver something. A vision and a manifesto that can be implemented, not just one that will be using platitudes and for campaign purposes. It's very critical that we move towards that direction if we actually want to evolve as a democratic country in the years to come.
Right. I think let's not, well, perhaps one point to mention here, and I want to agree to a large extent what Hassan has said. ANC is one of the oldest parties in Africa. Yes. Even in the world, by the way. But look at what has happened. You know, fighting against apartheid was an easier part, because they had a common vision, they had a common enemy, and therefore it was easy to unify the party. We said here last week, we are now talking about 30 years after the party. What united them towards fighting against the apartheid is not what unites them today. Today now is bread and butter, jobs, employment, income creation and all that. And this is where the party will have now strengths and stresses, and especially seen against the perhaps misadministration, which the party has been accused of, corruption and the rest. And therefore, there are those who are now running away to form new alliances. And that's where South Africa is at very, interesting crossroads. And therefore, the path that ANC charts forward will now make or unmake ANC.
Yeah, Debarl, let me make this adage like this. There are three major approaches to how we understand African politics. And the Ambassador, the whole discussion, the way I followed it, comes to two things. There is an external aspect to South Africa. By extension, there was a lot of foreign direct investments from the West in South Africa. What you used to see in South Africa was an extension of other parts of the world there. So there is a neo-Marxist argument there. But at the same time, there's what we call the statist approach. People are saying, now you are Africans. You've had your country for 30 years. There is no longer any apartheid in sight. What have you done with your country? And these are the stark realities. It is easy to say something, but to do it becomes something else. And we must run away as fast as we can, because Montesquieu said it. No man, no individual whoever it is, vested with power is not liable to abuse it. we must check them with institutions. And that is the way to go. And therefore, South Africa seems to have, inherited a powerful legacy in terms of economic power, in terms of where it was coming from, a powerhouse around the continent and in the world in many standards. It's even rated as one of the BRICS, as Brazil, Russia, India, China, and now South Africa. So because of the potential. But you can see a little bit of those bottlenecks. So managing the affairs of a state and building structures that go beyond individuals is one great lesson we must learn. And we must go beyond these parties that look like they are representing a tribe and a region. And because Professor Laparombara said, in fact, what we have in these places, or if you like to read Maurice Duverger and all this, we don't have parties. They have to be anchored on certain ideological and lasting things that go beyond people who speak a certain language and some of these things, or some village out there, into things that project into economy, jobs, and other things that point to our posterity as a nation. So we need to see more of this, so that in fact that would help to consolidate our democracy. But just look at a whole South Africa having such problems. So they are within their own path of growth and transformation, but I think they're a little bit caught short, so they need to work hard.
Debarl, I believe this is the beginning of the end of ANC as we know it.
Even under the chairmanship of
Ramaphosa. But this is the beginning of the end, unless they are very careful. Chairman Mao, as we know, purged the entire China through cultural revolution. But in Chairman Mao's vision, and I was a visiting scholar to Pudong District, University of Pudong, I find remnants of incredible, careful crafting of his vision for the future, where he put all the top economists to craft not only revolution, but what happened after the revolution. First, to clean up China out of Western influence, Japanese influence, everything. And then Chinese begin to think about themselves and creating craft that they originate from China. And it took years to turn communist, Stalin, Leninist theory into a really practical theory, which today we are all admiring as China is emerging as a major world power. Is this going to happen to ANC? I have a really serious fundamental doubt that he will transform into this kind of thing.
Okay, so I attended a conference for the last 2 days on governance. It was actually on governance summit, and it's all about ethical leadership. It's all about the report from Marvin King for governance codes. And of course, he's a South African. He's a Justice Marvin King from South Africa, retired justice, and he's been very instrumental in coming up with the corporate governance code as well. And one of the fundamental issues that he raises, of course, even as we're moving, companies don't really need to be looking down on the profit and losses and maximizing on the profit for the shareholders, but even the whole aspect of sustainability in the society. Ethical leadership is very key, not only just in government, but also in the corporate sector as well. Correct. But what lessons can we learn from here? This is what I want us to draw from what is happening in South Africa when it comes to ethical leadership. That if you've been indicted as a person, as a leader in corruption, then you have to step down, right? And what mechanisms do we have in this country as well? Because we've known so many leaders who've been embroiled in corruption, then they go scot-free. So many cases that we have, really, the reports have been done there, task committees have been put forth, they come up with reports, but none of that actually is affected at all. So as a country, where do we draw lessons And how can we as a country also try and up the ante in terms of making sure that our political parties are instruments of accountability, not instruments of winning elections? Yes, you will win an election through that particular party, but if you do not really, hold good or make good of your promise, then we recall you. I mean, that's the way we should go, right?
Debarl, let me say this.
Before we come to you, let's hear from Ambassador Erastus. Okay. How do we overhaul a political system in this country that is not just a politics of finger-pointing, accusatory fingers being raised every you, he, oh, she said, but it's a politics of issues, politics of substance, politics of progression, not retrogression?
Well, I can say without any doubt or hesitation that in Africa, perhaps the biggest challenge now we have is what you might call leadership deficit. And that deficit comes from a whole host of factors, some of which were mentioned here, that the state formation has never been very clearly articulated and understood by the practitioners who craft together the state. Because whereas in Africa now we have quasi-states, actually they are a collection of nation-states. And therefore the state has never been properly constituted in most of African countries. And this is what I think he mentioned early on.
Yes.
When he talked about the structures of the state and having institutions. We have a preference of strong men versus institutions. And that's one of the dangers. And this is what has brought us to where we are today, because if you look at our history, it was those parties that fought independence, perhaps these people who fought for independence were not properly equipped to get into leadership. And some of them were handed over this. So we were off to a false start. And of course, the external forces which dominated us for years, it is ironical and I think unfair for us, 60 years down the road for us to continue to blame our colonial masters. But that's history, that we inherited this fractured state, which was never properly formed, and therefore we are struggling to make it together. But unfortunately, each time we seem to make a good start, we fall back again. And so we need to start to see that change, like, cultural change, value change, so that we can now come down the table and say, how do we transcend these nation states which amalgamate to make a state, that we can now start to have a nation state that is functioning under institutional framework and a value system that is coherent with itself.
Oh, fantastic. And maybe we can hear from Dr. Khanenja as well. Even with the resignation of Attorney General Githu Muigai, that you don't have to go the whole gamut of your tenure. If you feel you're frustrated, so to speak, I'm not saying he said he is frustrated, but if you feel that you're not really performing according to the functions that is expected of you or that particular office, then you don't have to hang on until your tenure really comes full circle. You can actually resign if you don't think you're really performing. But in a country where people are saying, I'll rather die than resign, what lessons can we learn from Githu Muigai? I think we can look on the flip side as well, that yes, we need such leaders who think, okay, I don't have the mettle to actually go, or the grit to actually go full steam ahead and finish the tenure, so I tender my resignation because of such and such circumstances that I do have, or I feel maybe someone else will do a better job than I can. Or even declining some of these positions that people are awarded or appointed to.
Yeah, Debarl, we have a tendency in this part of the world to act as if we are children of a lesser God, somehow condemned to perpetual misery. And anytime we see something different, something that's supposed to be proper in other parts of the world, it raises alarm. Now, I want to hope that Professor Githu resigned because either perhaps he thought he should leave the post for someone else, or perhaps he thought he might not be able to deliver within the circumstances, or just resigned honorably for his own reasons. Because if that is the case, I allowed him for doing that. That's what we should be doing. But the fact that we find it surprising that someone actually may just resign because they think it's about time they should go, it speaks not more about them, but actually more about us and how we look at ourselves. And I think as a country and a society, you know, we should be more confident in our abilities. We should be more confident in ourselves, and look forward to actually more resignations. You know, in lots of other countries, there is a train that derails somewhere, and then the transport minister resigns because they think the buck stops with them, and ultimately is their responsibility. But this idea of chest thumping, you know, I'd rather die than resign, it's actually not helpful. And it's shaping young minds in a wrong way, because once they assume those offices, they're going to be acting the same way.
All right.
Debarl.
Yes. Very briefly.
Debarl, America is great because American people feel part and parcel of the stake of the American being. They call it the America exceptionalist. They're very proud. When their national anthem is playing, people cry. You know, there's a really emotional attachment to the state. And I will disagree with the ambassador that we were off, or there was a fault on our start, because otherwise we should have left the colonialists for perpetual, you know, control of the Africa. And almost 60 years, we're still talking about colonialism. You know, we're taking the system that we need to build, craft and build ourselves. You cannot talk about a system without people. You must build the people. You must create the middle class. You must create a stake where every person feels that I'm part of this system. Otherwise, it cannot work. The history has demonstrated that over and over again. And if you watch China, China is transforming the people of China through very careful crafting economics and vision, which bring and make sure that everyone has a house, everyone has transportation, and everyone has a stake in the system. We cannot. And secondly, there is tendency for us in Africa to be very happy. You know, Idi Amin destroyed Uganda, and then we still accept him as president in Addis Ababa. This fellow in Congo is destroying the country. We still accept him. Their situation in South Africa is enough is enough.
Enough is enough. And of course, what do we do also with these leaders? Because I can also show you, if my director Mark may just pick up this. This is a former president of Guatemala. That is Alvaro Como, who's being arraigned in court because of issues of corruption as well. So even after, you know, him finishing his tenure as well, if there are cases of corruption, do we go full steam ahead and capture you still? Do you have that immunity that, yes, we know so many people have been embroiled in corruption cases in this country, but they go scot-free? You know, we're talking of the Golden Bag, we're talking of so many scandals as we have, maize scandals, but we still have leaders who no one is actually going after them, even after they finish their tenure. So what lessons do we draw from the world as well? We can see in Seoul, President Park had to resign because of, you know, not even her being straight on with the corruption, but because she's privy and association with Sony and the friends, you know, she had to actually go. Very briefly, as we're winding up as well.
Debarl, it comes down to three things, and Professor Hayden said there are three dimensions of governance. We must have genuine leadership, people who believe in what they tell people. They don't come and say, I'll build you a road, and then once they're elected, they run away. So they need that kind of thing. And then, very importantly, a supporting political culture, supporting political culture. Let me tell you, Debarl, the way you see people getting scot-free with corruption is because there are people who like it, and there are people who benefit from it, and there are many.
And they want to keep the system.
Yes, and they want to keep the status quo. They love it, and even the communities, some of them say, you are accusing our son of corruption, you see. So we really have to build that political culture in order to move our institutions and to make our parties to be drivers of governance. How many of them hold good, clean elections, party nominations in the first place? So we really have got to look at all these, and it can't be done in a day, but we have to do it incrementally.
Thank you. Let's hear from...
Just a quick comment.
Ambassador, 30 seconds as you're winding up, also your closing remarks.
I hope the Professor doesn't understand me as saying that we would have had perpetual colonialism. I mean, that would be a disaster.
No.
What we mean here by saying off to a false start, look at even our constitution. Where was it drawn? We brought it from Lancaster House. How many people went there? What was their background? How did we consent to them going to draw that constitution? How long did we use that constitution before we come with us? You see, this is the very false start, because if you look at the structures that were under colonialism, it's literally what we took on and moved on. And so, until we come to a situation, like what we were saying, say Mao, where you had a cultural revolution, we are still going to live in this mode of borrowed ideas, and which we crafted, which perhaps we have not even internalized and accepted.
Right, thank you. Let's hear from 30 seconds, Prof.
30 seconds. We need to build a next prison, next to a committee called economic crime, and lock all these people out.
So even if you have a prison and we have an act that is not being implemented, what is the rhyme and reason for having it? Right? We can have all that, or even come with legislation, but still, right? If they are not effected, it will be null and void. Let's hear from Dr. Momonzao, briefly, 30 seconds.
To build a country for the good of all citizens, we have to believe in the common gain we get from being part of the state and being one nation. And therefore, we must nurture a positive political culture that upholds institutions.
Thank you. Dr. Khanenja.
The trouble sometimes we have in our country is that when you steal chicken, you end up in committee. When you steal $1 billion, get elected to office. Now, what I would like to remind all the leaders out there is that it is not the example, it's not the example of your power that brings positive change. It's the power of your example that transforms societies.
Thank you very much. Quite an illuminary and incisive discussion there. And of course, also I'll be remiss if I don't read one or two tweets here from our Twitter handle. We have Phil Hippo Odoche saying, don't blame Tanzania. Kenyans are used to doing things the wrong way. There could be some set rules that traders from Kenya are trying to break, right? Then we have protectors saying, those who imported illegally should be punished, but to destroy chicks with shortage of food should be a crime against nature. They could have been confiscated and given to local farmers to raise them. Why is such action tolerated? Also, we have Jacob Abere Mtalala saying, Jacob Zuma goose already, NC party has been cooked or roasted. Only he needed to vacate before they haunt him. Also, we have Dan Iberi saying, government of Kenya ought to come clean on the festering relations between Kenya and its neighbors, especially Tanzania. They no longer respect us and bully us at will. Either we are unashamedly breaking their trade laws, or we become politically impotent in the region. Impotent. And then we have Marjorie. He said his second term will be lethal. This is us, just the beginning. Brave yourself, guys. Starting with the judiciary. Of course, commenting on the judiciary. Now, we have Naftali Mariu saying our leaders have demonstrated that perfectly. They don't resign even after involvement in a big scandal. And lastly, artists, gender balance on the panel won't hurt. There are many able women who can make meaningful contribution to the discussion.
Absolutely.
Of course, we've been castigated on this, having manuals on our show. But if you are a security expert and you think you can actually sit with our panelists here, why don't you come? And of course, give us also your thoughts as well. You're highly welcome. Yeah, my Gmail is atiwat@gmail.com. Atiwat without a question mark. atiwat@gmail.com. Let's talk. Then we'll have you also come to the show and join Professor Noami Damba and the rest, Professor Ambassador Mwenche here, and of course Dr. Momonzao and Khanenja as well. Thank you very much for your valued company, and of course I appreciate your tweets as well. So atiwat@gmail.com. Drop me an email. Thank you for your valued company. My name is Debarl Clement Inea.